All right, so today we will move through our typical kind of opening notes, reminders. We have a small enough group that maybe we will do introductions today, and we also don't have a case for today. So my hope is that Dr. Parsi's excellent presentation will spur some conversation, and then we can always open it up to any pressing clinical issues or things that are top of mind. In worst case scenario, we can end things a little bit early and give you the gift of time on a lovely Friday. So as a reminder, if there are multiple of you at your site, please go ahead and enter the names of any of your other attendees so we can keep track of who's here for CME and other purposes. Everybody has mastered the art of muting their microphone at this point. But when you do speak, it'd be great to say your name just as we continue to get to know each other. And similarly, if you're in a place where you can keep your video on, that is always appreciated, as we like to see who's here. And, but understand also if either bandwidth or kind of the setting you're in would prohibit that. We don't have a case, as I mentioned, but certainly if we talk about clinical issues, please do your best to protect PHI. Also, a reminder that these sessions are all recorded, available on our website. They're easily accessible. And then you will get a very brief post-session survey today as well. And we really do value that input to think about how we can continue to refine this to be the best program possible. A couple of other reminders. As is our tradition, we only have one session in November and December. And it's off sequence a little bit for November, given the holidays. So it'll be the 18th of November, and we will have our own Gina Kang talking about palliative care. And then on December 9th, we have our own Dr. Angela Hansen talking about diets. So those are things to stay tuned for the end of the year, and that will take us up through the end of this calendar year. Please do consider presenting a case. It helps us, it helps you, it helps the community, it helps your patients, families. Really always appreciate that. We have accreditation for CME. These are the usual kind of disclosures. And we don't have any disclosures, but accreditation statements. Neither our speaker nor our planning committee have any financial relationships. Same for nursing. Here is our hub team, and I see one of our hub members already has his hand up for a question or a comment. So I will, oh, here you are, but I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And again, there are few enough of us here to do some introductions, but I see Dr. Gaster's hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I had my calendar up to date. So we are not going to have an echo session on November 11th, which is Veterans Day.
Correct.
But we are going to have one on November 18th.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And since you're unmuted, I would love it if you'd introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Barack Gaster, and I'm a general internal medicine primary care doctor at the UW Medical Center at Roosevelt and the director of the Cognition in Primary Care program.
Outstanding. Glad you're here. And how about Mimi?
Hi, everyone. Mimi Pattison, Virginia Mason Franciscan Health, Hospice, and Palliative Care.
I'm glad you're here. And Trang?
Hi there, my name is Trang Lei. I'm a clinical pharmacist at Overlake Senior Healthcare Clinic.
Very good. So glad you're here. And Karen Hayes.
Hi, everyone. I am actually a nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, but in my role here as a care partner to someone with dementia, my husband, who's in year 7 of his lifestyle with Lewy body. So I'm here in that role.
And we are so glad you are here in that role. From the inception of this, it has been our have represented people who are care partners, caregivers as well as ideally somebody living with dementia. I think that voice is so important. We're still working on that, but Karen, thank you so much for your time and your expertise in joining us. How about Karen Clay?
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Clay. I'm a clinical social worker working at the UW Memory and Brain Wellness Center at Harborview.
Glad you're here. And Ranja.
Hi, everybody. I'm a nurse practitioner. I work with Franciscan Hospice and Palliative Medicine down in Tacoma. So good to see you all on this Friday.
See you too. And is it Marielle?
It is. Hi, everybody. I'm Marielle. I do outpatient palliative care outreach in the Tacoma area. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here. And Cynthia. Give a second. May come back. Christine looks like she's ready to unmute.
Hi, I'm Christine Kempe. I'm a PA at Fircrest Residential Habilitation Center.
Awesome. And remind us, please, where Fircrest is. Is that
in Shoreline?
Shoreline. Excellent. All right. And Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Dotson. I'm a nurse practitioner at the Swedish Center for Healthy Aging.
Welcome. Good to see you again. And oh, now it looks like Cynthia may be unmuted. Oh, and remuted. Well, we'll come back to you. Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Troncales, one of the internal medicine and geriatrics. I was at St. Francis before, but I just moved to St. Joseph's Medical Center, part of Virginia Mason Franciscan Health.
Oh, congratulations and great to see you again.
Thanks.
Okay. Liliana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liliana Bogan, and I join a few other people from the Virginia Mason Franciscan Health Palliative Care Outreach Team. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. All right. And Rhonda.
I am Rhonda Holden. I'm an administrator for Home Health Hospice and hopefully soon a palliative care program in Ellensburg, Washington. So all the way from Eastern Washington to join you today.
All right. Ellensburg. Oh, man, one of my favorite Central Washington towns. How about, well, Molly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Molly Shumway. I am the Senior Director for Digital Health here at UW Medicine and standing in as AV support for today's session. Thanks for having me. I also have a parent with dementia, so I'm super interested in learning more. So very happy to be here.
Oh, we are happy that you are here for multiple reasons. And Jeff.
Jeff Kaplan, county practice in Yakima, your other favorite Eastern Washington town.
I'm not going to say which one is my favorite, but those two are up there. Yeah. How about Paul?
I am from way over in Dayton, Washington. I'm a social worker at Columbia County Health System.
Great to have you here. And Dayton was one of our first sites who joined this program way back in June of 2020. So lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Sarah?
Hi, yes, I'm Sarah Becker. I'm an occupational therapist with the Seattle PACE program.
Outstanding.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, glad you're here. And I see Kimmy has also joined us. Maybe, yep.
Hey, I'm Kimmy Demoto Riley, one of the neurologists at the Memory and Brain Wellness Center at Harborview.
Glad you're here. And Cynthia, third time the charm? Nope. Well, maybe we'll connect with you in some way, shape, or form during the discussion. All right, and then last but not least, absolutely, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Carolyn Parsi, neuropsychologist here at Memory and Brain Wellness and assistant professor in the Department of Neurology, who will be talking about technology solutions for staying safe at home and on the go. Thank you so much for presenting today, and I will turn it over to you.
Does that look good on everyone's side? Perfect. So thanks for having me this afternoon. This is going to be giving kind of a very slimmed down version of a longer talk that I give around technology as it pertains primarily to falls, navigation, and wandering. So talking a lot about wearables today. And so got a little bit of my background just for context. So a lot of my research background is in technology for people with broadly with memory loss, but including people with MCI and dementia as well as their families. Anything from smart environments to more consumer available technologies. So we'll be talking mostly about wearables today in this kind of condensed version, but it sounds like we have some a little bit extra time potentially today. So if folks have other questions, I'm happy to try and address them best that I can. Whenever I give technology talks, I always just put out there that a lot of I'm going to be throwing out names of products, brand names, all kinds of things. For the sake of everything at UW, I am not endorsing anything, and I have to make that very clear. I'm putting out things as examples, and there's many other things and brands out there other than things I'll be talking about today. So with all of that being said, what is wearable technology? So most of you are probably familiar with this, but the concept of a wearable is effectively any item that you wear that is either acquiring or providing data in some way, shape, or form. It might be in a very passive way in that it's just collecting information as you go. It could be something that is more active, in which case it is actually providing you with some sort of feedback, or you interact with it in some regard. So things that you're probably very familiar with, and probably I'm going to guess at least 50% of the folks on this call have some sort of smart watch on them, whether it be an Apple Watch, I'm a Garmin wearer, Fitbit, something like that. So those all are included under the concept of wearable, but that also includes things that are more medical devices. And so we've seen more and more of these, especially with diabetes management and real-time data collection and checking of blood sugars. For example, like kind of down here where we have somebody where they're actually wearing a sensor, and they can wear that all the time. And then they can check with a handheld device rather than doing finger sticks for blood. We also have things that have been around for quite a while. I'll be talking about these a little bit too. Things that are kind of up in this top right, where they are medical alert systems of some sort. The oldest versions of those still exist in that pendant form with a call button, but they've also expanded to be much more passive or not necessarily need as much interaction as they have in the past. And then getting even more fancy and kind of the latest and greatest type things is trying to take a lot of wearable data and make it even smaller than we normally have wrapped our head around before. So up here, one of the more recent examples are these not so small rings. I will say they're quite bulky, but effectively kind of like taking the data and the sensors that would be in a smartwatch and then zooming it all the way down to the size of a ring, and they're just capturing it off of your finger. Is one of the newer directions that people are headed. So more in this almost like jewelry, more aesthetically pleasing approaches to biometric data for health metrics and health monitoring. So there is a rise, like everything else, there's a rise in wearable use in older adults. So some of the most recent data that we have is coming out of 2021, both through the AARP and then also through a couple of other studies through the Aging and Health Technology Watch, which I'll definitely mention as a resource later. But one of the largest growth markets in the past couple of years has actually been the 65 plus group in terms of acquiring new types of wearable devices, and in particular smart watches. So the Apple Watch being especially high on that list because many of those patients are also having smartphones, and those smartphones might be iPhones, and so they're staying with the same brand of Apple to Apple. The majority of older adults are describing this more for health monitoring and management. I was talking about diabetes, but also things like heart rate, blood pressure. A lot of our smartwatches can acquire that data in real time. And there's more and more of this being talked about as options to integrate even into EHR systems, and that we can potentially take all this data that patients effectively have on their wrist, and then how can we take it and put it into the into the health record, into Epic or whatever your Cerner, and then use it for better monitoring rather than just your heart rate or your blood pressure at the time of a visit, right? And so can we look at better data over long-standing periods rather than just one time point? People are also interested in activity monitoring, step counts, things like that, and then as well as safety. This is coming out of AARP. They did a really big survey of technology use in older adults, broadly just in older adults, not necessarily people with memory loss or any sort of cognitive symptoms, but they're seeing more and more that large numbers of people are owning a smartphone, they're owning tablets. Smart TVs are basically ubiquitous if you're buying a television now. So these are increasing even in our 60 plus groups, not just our kind of younger, older adults, but our older groups as well. So common wearables, this is, I have slimmed this into maybe the 5 most common things, but there are many branches off of this. I've been talking a lot about smartwatches, and I'll be talking about those in more detail here in just a minute. But we also have things more there just specific for fitness tracking. You'll hear me talk about Fitbit in like many different ways, because depending on what Fitbit you have, it falls into a different category. So there are very fancy Fitbits that are effectively an Apple Watch level caliber, everything to a very, very simple pedometer and everything in between. They have a huge range. So Fitbit fits into a lot of categories, including a sleep tracker. The Fitbit Versa has sleep tracking, but more of the simple ones do not have those metrics in them. So we also have medical grade monitors. I'm not going to talk about any of that today because those are not consumer available directly. Those are prescribed. So things like the Freestyle Libre for diabetes, or basically wearable EEG, or I mean EKG, for heart health. Those are prescribed, and they are FDA medical devices. But I will talk about medical alert and personal emergency response, because I feel like that's one of the most common questions I get about technology, has to do a lot with that. And so that's what I'll really be focusing on today. So I'll first start with smartwatches. You guys are probably very familiar with what they're capable or not capable of doing, but just when I talk about smartwatches, I'm talking about the ones that are pretty darn intelligent. So anything from conducting phone calls, providing weather alerts, email alerts, things like that. Effectively any watch that can connect and sync with a smartphone, whether it be Android or whether it be iPhone, or Apple, or Google phone, which operates kind of on an Android system, but a little bit different. So lots of different varieties, lots of different visualizations of what this can look like, things that actually look nearly entirely like a normal watch and not a small computer. So one of the things that I emphasize with patients who are interested, especially people, older adults, people with memory loss, is the opportunity to engage with emergency alert systems that are already embedded in smartwatches. And one thing to know is that many of those programs that are already installed are turned off as a default. So you actually have to turn it on. People have a misperception that it comes out of the box and it's already going to do all of this for me, but you actually have to go through a couple of steps to make sure that this system exists. So the Apple Watch is the one that you're seeing on the visual here. So in the case of an Apple Watch, when the emergency alert or the fall detection system is turned on, what will happen is that when somebody takes a fall or they trip or something like that, you'll get this image that comes up on the screen far left where it says it looks like you've taken a hard fall. And if you switch that and says kind of emergency SOS and you flick that to the right, it will call emergency service and it will look like that, the kind of the image on the right. You can also turn it off or kind of disengage it and say, yep, I fell, or something else happened, or it was a missed trigger. And you can disregard it and it will go back to whatever it was doing. The Google Pixel watch also has a similar platform, as does Samsung Galaxy. The Fitbit, the higher versions like Versa and Ionic also have a similar program, all designed from a accelerometer that detects whether somebody has gone from a certain position to another position, usually in a drop in a very rapid manner. So that's what it's detecting and can flick it on. Now you have to, this is what I mean by you actually have to turn it on and engage it and tell it what to do. And this is usually the step that I end up working with folks about is how to actually do this part. But there are great tutorials online that are actually quite simple, including through Apple and Google and Android, like Samsung directly, which is remarkable, is that they're actually written quite nicely of how to go about this and tailor it to your needs. So you can have it where it can immediately call 911 and that's your default, but you can also defer to an emergency person that you designate. So if you have so this is your loved one and you have the spouse as the emergency contact, it can call them. It could call a child, anybody in your contact list, and you can designate it as that. So that's what the handy personalization for it can be. And so if you have somebody who's out on a walk or something like that, and they do take a fall and they are conscious and this happens and that they're out by themselves and they flick that, it could actually call you back at home rather than immediately calling 911, or you could have it do the opposite depending on your preference. Now there are also many other types of wearables for fall detection. We had a great talk on falls a couple weeks back as well. Thinking about these, and these are some of maybe the oldest technology that were really designed for safety at home. But things like Medical Guardian, which is the program up here, the piece up here, are these home-based systems. So they usually, Medical Guardian offers both home-based systems and then systems that are good for on the go. You just have to know which one you have. And that's usually my first question, because patients will tell me, well, we have Medical Guardian, and you say, okay, so which type? Because if it's a Medical Guardian home system, that can only work or detect or respond to emergencies that are happening inside the house. It doesn't matter if they're wearing the lanyard and they're outside the house, it won't do anything if they're out, again, like if they're out on a walk. A system that's designed for something on the go actually connects to either a phone or it connects direct to a cell network. And that way it's more like the Apple Watch or something like that, where as you're walking outside and you're away from the house, it will still be able to call for help, even though you're not connected to the home base. So two different types of systems that have their own limitations and strengths. But these are kind of when you think about the original lanyard of somebody wearing it. And then if they fall, they have to push the button. So one of the cons or the challenges that come with these types of programs or setups is that the person has to, right, A, be wearing the device, especially if they're in the home, and then B, they have to know that or remember that what they need to do is push the button for help, right? And so when we think about people with memory loss, that's a lot to ask, right? When we're in an emergency situation, we don't think very well. None of us do, let alone when we have kind of cognitive difficulties already on board, that asking somebody to do kind of potentially two other steps is a lot to ask in an emergency situation, let alone if somebody's unconscious, right? So there are limitations to what these can do if they require that direct input from the wearer, right? There are also third-party apps that exist if you don't have the snazziest phone, if your phone is still quote unquote smart, which is basically means that if it has an interactive, like a touchpad rather than buttons to push, like an old Nokia is not gonna cut it for these apps. But if you have any sort of really old smartphone, that there are third-party apps. The big challenge being is that they're only going to detect something if you're actively holding the phone or have it in your pocket or have it on your person. So again, kind of restricts the utility if you're not somebody who wanders the house with your phone and instead you leave it on the kitchen counter most of the day. There's a really nice the National Council on Aging did a really nice product comparison, which the link is listed here, and happy to send it out after the talk as well so that you have it. But they do a really nice comparison of these different programs and products that are available, the cost, whether it's a monthly fee or just like a base price, what type of connection, how long is the battery life, et cetera. And they do, this is the grid of the comparison, but they do a detailed kind of evaluation or review of the different products as well. And they actually update that relatively frequently. So that's handy. I often will direct people if they have specific questions around, would this one work for me versus that one? They do a nice job of the types of features that each have. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was a little bit about navigation, because I feel like this is the other question that I get the absolute most as well. It has to do with wandering, preserving autonomy for folks who have memory loss and they want to be able to still go for that walk that they usually do for a mile, mile and a half, 2 miles. But the person back at home wants to feel confident that they know where the person is, and that in the event that they needed some to go find them, that they would know where they were. And so there's a couple of technologies that are out there that are that allow for a little bit of that, preserving autonomy, but also feeling that there is this safety net. So there are a couple of standalone devices. I've listed 2 here, which are GeoBot and Tracky. They effectively work the same way. They're kind of the size of roughly a Ritz cracker. It's a little bit bigger than a quarter. And you wear them just like a pedometer. So you can attach them, they'll have like little clips, and you can either attach them to your, to your pocket, you can attach them to a belt, you can also throw them into a purse. And then they have a monitoring of a location through an app. So these are the couple of apps where it shows where somebody is on a map. And then you can direct connect that with anybody in your network. So you can include your all the people in your family if you want to. You can alert people that, hey, so-and-so is walking to your house. Here they're headed off, and it will give them a notification of where they are in the route. You can also just have it more passive, and it's not alerting anybody. So that's nice, and it's a pretty low barrier object to be wearing. It's not heavy, it's not bulky. There are also, if somebody is just good about carrying their phone with them and it is on, this will not work if the phone is not on, or if the battery is dead, right? So if the phone is on, we can turn on location services to have more precise locations as well. The smartwatch apps that attach to phones can also do this too. And this is one example of that location sharing. So this is if you didn't want to wear like a small object, you can also do this through your phone, so long as you're carrying your phone with you. And before somebody leaves the house, you can turn on location sharing. This is the example through Google Maps. So if you have Google Maps open, you just ping the location sharing button under the settings, and then you can say for how long, whether it's just for the next hour or just until they get back, and you turn it off, and then it can share with whoever your contacts are. There's a nice tutorial for how to do this. I'm happy to send out that link as well, but PC Mag did a really nice job of just, here's the 1, 2, 3 of how to set this up, and you can have it set up like, again, before somebody goes out for a walk or something like that. You can also do this with sharing your estimated time of arrival. So you can share what they call their trip progress. You can do this while you're driving too, or you shouldn't be operating your phone while you're driving, but before you leave and you are putting up your instructions or directions, you can hit share my trip progress, and you can specifically send it to somebody in your contacts. So you can do that as well. Again, if somebody is supposed to meet someone at a particular time, you can see where they are in the route, whether or not they're backed up in traffic, or if they're took a bit of an odd detour, and again, be able to know where they are and maybe roughly when they should be arriving. The next question that I get about this is, why can't I just use an Apple AirTag on a human being? And because those are cheap and they're small, and they're $20. And the answer is Apple explicitly says, do not do this, probably because lawsuits are inevitably going to ensue. But the main reason is that the AirTags, which are great, they are the size of a quarter. There are others like Tile and Cube. There are other companies that have these. That the ping or the update of that information is much slower than what is on directly on your phone, or through something else like Geobit or Tracky, is that it's not happening every second. It's also dependent on a cell network. We had a great example of the slowness. I was recently had the privilege of going to Finland for vacation, and we were convinced that my husband's luggage, which had an AirTag in it, was stuck in Helsinki, because my AirTag for my luggage, sure enough, showed up and said, yes, it's at SeaTac when we were waiting, and his still said it was in Helsinki. Sure enough, it did eventually update, but that was 12 hours of time. So the amount of time that, if you can imagine, if you're worried about where somebody is and for some reason there's a cell delay or an update delay, that 12 hours is a very, very worrisome amount of time for that potential delay to happen. So the companies that make these strongly encourage not using them for humans. They're great for tracking items like your backpack. Did you leave your wallet behind? Things like that, but do not put them on human beings for that reason. But smart tags are great for misplaced items, things that they can connect to your phone as well, and they can tell you, that you left your wallet back at the restaurant. You can put actually alarms on them or notifications so that if you are too far away from something, it will ping you and say, hey, did you leave this behind? And you can set that up if you want that, or if you don't want that notification, you can also turn it off. It's turned off by default, but you can turn it on. So I like to always usually end with the little bit of a caveat on smart tags and what they should and should not be used for. These are some bigger resources just in talking about broadly technology, lots of different technologies that I really like. The Aging and Health Technology Watch is a group that does independent reviews of different technologies out there, unbiased. They're not paid for these reviews. They get no affiliate marketing like boost for anybody buying anything off of there. And they get up to date or kind of routinely update different technologies that are newer. So that's a really great resource. Also, the Caregiver Tech Tool Finder, which is similarly, it's a group that is focused specifically on caregivers who are looking for technologies, like a couple of the ones that I mentioned today that might be helpful for them in their caring for their loved ones. And they also have plenty of reviews, and then also kind of some shorter tutorials on different things that might be handy specifically for kind of a caregiver role. And then if you're not familiar with OATS, OATS is the Older Adult Technology Service. It is fantastic. It was kind of absorbed by AARP 2 years ago, I think. And they put on a lot of great programming online and in person through a program they call Senior Planet. And this is helping more with like computer literacy and technology literacy for older adults, especially as telehealth and healthcare delivered in non-traditional ways is becoming more and more prevalent, and to help people get to that level of literacy so they can engage with telehealth and alternative methods of from just that in-person visit. So OATS is really great, and they have little outposts throughout the country. And if there isn't one, then there's kind of a way to nudge to try and bring one to like a local, whether it's a senior center or a library, kind of a county library service or something like that too. And then a shameless plug for the Memory Hub Tech Lab, which is what I've been running and kicked off several months ago at the Memory Hub on First Hill. On Tuesdays, we're doing a couple of things. One is routine or kind of roughly monthly webinars and workshops around different types of technology, and then also doing one-on-one consults for people looking for specific questions or specific technology related how-tos, and doing those one-on-one with folks, and all that information, including signups for those appointments or sign up and registration for the workshops, are all on that website as well. So that's what I have for you today. Happy to take questions about any of this, or since we have a little extra time, if there are other brewing questions too about different tech, I will do my best to address those too.
Carolyn, this is Jeff Kaplan from Yakima. I have two questions. I have a daughter who does research in biosensors, and this has been a little discussion. If you were to have your absolute choice in what you'd want technology to do for a family who has a demented relative, what features would you want?
Oh, this is such a great question. So I am one of my passions, and this taps a little bit of what I did a lot of in research in the past, has to do a lot with kind of predicting what kind of the health of in the future, right? So I'm always very interested in patterns, and this goes to just, I'm a psychologist at heart. So is patterns of behavior and how people are engaging with the environment around them. So I'm very interested, and some places have been tapping a lot of this in terms of like, you know, activity level, gait, stride length, things like that, as well as kind of your classic like heart rate and heart rate variability, you know, things like that. But I'm always very interested in activity patterns, because we're seeing more from a sensor based on the research side, we're seeing more and more of that being incredibly predictive of people's general health. And being able to use those sorts of real-time data to say and kind of nudge someone of, you don't even notice this in yourself yet, but something is changing. And let's go talk to somebody, right, about what might be going on and get some of those early tests done. Because as we know, right, early diagnosis is key to many things in dementia care. And so those are the big, the big pieces for me. Is a lot of it's like activity, physical function, and whether that be, again, like gait, stride, amount of activity, steps, intensity, things like that, I feel like are definitely the direction of the future.
And then my second, thank you. And my second question was, I have a patient I saw this week who has a father who's got mild dementia, who's now suddenly living on his own with the passing of his wife. And he set up 8 to 10 cameras all around the property so he can always see where his father is. This guy's pretty technologically savvy. What are your recommendations for families in that sort of setting?
Yeah, cameras are such a touchy, as you can imagine, a very, very touchy subject. And a lot, I'm going to default to a principle that me and several of my like-minded colleagues who are kind of in the dementia technology space usually come back to, which is engaging the person with memory loss, the person with MCI or dementia, in the conversation around what they are comfortable with in terms of technology and monitoring, right? So one of my worries often with cameras, even though they can be well intended, is that whether that person feels that is a true, an extreme invasion of their privacy. And again, in acknowledging autonomy and that people can still engage in a lot of their preferential, preferences and indicating what they prefer or don't prefer. I have a colleague, Clara Barrage, who is fantastic. She's in the UW School of Social Work, and she's actually developing right now, she has a K award where she's looking at actually what I'm getting at, which is a tool to help people with dementia indicate their preference in relation to specifically technology as their disease progresses. So in the same way that you would have a advanced care planning conversation that about, you know, whether somebody wants this level of care or this level of intervention should something happen, is a very similar type of questions or process around, do you want this, you know, if it means being able to stay in your home, are you okay with X type of technology, you know, cameras, like actual cameras, right? Or no, I'm not. Like that's an invasion of privacy that I will not tolerate, right? And so making that kind of known, and ideally having those conversations right earlier rather than later, is good too. So that might have been a dance around to your question, and I'll acknowledge that. But I think, you know, everybody's situation is a little different. I usually, when I have these conversations with patients and families, I usually start with, what are you worried about? Like, are we worried about wandering? Are we worried about safety? Are we worried about, right? Like, what is the end piece that I'm particularly worried about? And then let's work backwards, right? And let's say, like, okay, we have various options here, putting those in front of the person of, we can, you know, kind of almost levels, like, here's the lowest barrier, least invasive, here's a step up from that, right?
Thank you.
And Karen, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi everybody, Karen Hayes here. Great conversation, because it leads right into a couple of things I wanted to ask about, Carolyn. One was overcoming the psychology of people who don't want to wear a wearable. For example, my husband just is constantly taking things off all the time, no matter what. His belt, his shoes, his glasses, can't keep anything on him. And then I have a mother-in-law who's 97 with full-blown dementia, and my mother who has MCI, living in a independent retirement apartment. So what my sisters did for my mother, a step down from cameras, which I don't think she would have approved of, but they just set up one of those Echoes, a smart speaker. So my sisters set that up, and they set it up with the to trigger their phones. You put it in order. If she fell and said, you have to say, you know, call my daughter, or, you know, whatever the phrase is, or I've fallen. They put in various, I don't have one of those things. So, so I don't know how it all works, but they did that instead, but they didn't. And then the other thing, my sister who lives in Texas, my mom's in California, every morning she gets up and she can activate it, and she can hear that my mom's sort of shuffling around and getting her tea and, you know, snapping the paper open and so forth, turning on the radio. And if she doesn't hear anything, then she'll call. But she didn't tell my mom that she was listening. Like, the little dot does a light up, but my mom's not going to see that. And so I felt it was my duty to say, Mom, did you know that Lori and Nancy can listen in on you, and you might not know they're listening? And I told them I said, I don't think you can do that without asking her, because it is just MCI. It's not like my mother-in-law, who wouldn't even know what we're talking about. And fortunately she said, oh, that's great. You know, I'm happy to have them checking on me. So that just relaxed me from the surveillance point of view, even though I thought it was a great idea. So this is my other part of the question, was the psychology of wearing, you know, other than my husband, who isn't really having a psychology around it. But, you know, my mother-in-law, when she was more cognitively intact, no way would she wear that necklace or the little bracelet, because she's very aware of her image and her, you know, the stigma around having dementia, or the vanity, you know, smartwatch, how ugly is that? She's not going to wear that. It's not delicate. And so no way would she wear something like that. And then also some people get paranoia, you know, that I don't want this connected to anything. The government's going to be watching me, or the bad guys across the street, or whatever delusions or hallucinations they might be having. And then my last piece is just the cost of this. And are there any programs to help people who can't afford? I just bought a battery for my tile yesterday that's to help me find my keys. And it was $7. And yeah, it lasts a year or two, but $7 was a lot. So anyway, so those are some of the comments that I was jotting down if you want to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're raising so these are I'm smiling because these are the most common things that come up when I have these conversations with folks.